My mother stood at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, smiling like she was about to announce something wonderful. My father sat beside her, nodding along. My brother Xavier leaned back in his chair, already grinning. I didn't know why yet, but my stomach tightened. "We've made a decision about Grandma Rose's estate," Mom said, her voice warm and certain. "After a lot of thought, we've decided to give Xavier the full amount to invest in his business." The room erupted in applause. My aunt clapped. My uncle raised his glass. Xavier stood, accepting hugs like he'd earned something. I sat frozen, fork halfway to my mouth. That money was supposed to be split between us. Grandma's will said so. I'd read it myself 3 years ago at the lawyer's office. $50,000 each. My mother's eyes finally found mine. "You understand, don't you, sweetie? You've always been so mature about these things." Everyone was watching me now, waiting. I felt my face arrange itself into something that resembled a smile. "Of course," I heard myself say. The words tasted like metal. My aunt reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're such a strong girl, always have been." Xavier avoided looking at me directly, but his shoulders relaxed. My father cleared his throat. "You've got your teaching job, stable income. Xavier needs this opportunity to get his feet under him." I nodded because refusing to nod would have made me the villain. The conversation moved on quickly, too quickly, like they'd been holding their breath. Dessert was served. Someone made a joke about Xavier finally becoming responsible. Laughter filled the room, but I couldn't hear it anymore. I was counting backwards in my head, trying to remember when this decision had been made. When had anyone asked me? The answer was clear and cold. Never. I drove home in silence, hands gripping the wheel too tight. My phone buzzed with a text from Xavier. "Thanks for being cool about it, sis. Means a lot." I didn't reply. At every red light, I replayed the dinner. The way Mom had practiced that announcement. The way Dad had statistics ready about startup success rates. The way Xavier had his acceptance speech prepared. This wasn't spontaneous. This was choreographed. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the darkness, engine ticking as it cooled. $50,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was grad school. That was the safety net Grandma Rose had wanted both of us to have. She'd told me once, 2 months before the cancer took her, "I'm making sure you and your brother are taken care of equally. That's what's fair." I remembered her exact words. I remembered her holding my hand when she said them. Inside my apartment, I went straight to the filing cabinet. I kept everything Grandma had given me over the years. Birthday cards, recipes, photographs. And there, in a manila folder marked important, was my copy of her will. I spread it on the kitchen table under the bright overhead light. Section 7, Monetary Assets. The sum of $100,000 to be divided equally between my grandchildren, Nicole Hayes and Xavier Hayes, $50,000 each. I read it 3 times. The language was clear. Legal. Notarized. I checked the date. January 2022. She'd updated it just 6 months before she died, making sure everything was current and clear. I photographed every page with my phone, uploaded them to 3 different cloud storage accounts. Then I called the law office that had handled the estate. It was late, so I left a message requesting copies of all final distribution documents. Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, memories did. I lay in the dark, watching them parade past like evidence at a trial. Xavier's college tuition, fully paid. Mine covered by scholarships and loans I was still paying off. His first car, bought outright as a graduation gift. Mine, a hand-me-down that died within a year. "You're more responsible with money," they'd said. "We knew you'd make it work." Christmas gifts that were noticeably different in value. Birthdays where his parties were events and mine were dinners. Every time I'd noticed, I'd pushed it down, told myself I was being petty. But now, staring at my ceiling at 3 in the morning, I saw it clearly. This wasn't new favoritism. This was a pattern 25 years in the making. And I had been trained carefully and completely to smile through it. To be mature. To understand. That training ended tonight. At Sunday breakfast 3 days later, I asked my first careful question. We were at my parents' house, the usual weekend ritual. Xavier was talking about his business plans, some app he wanted to develop. I waited for a pause. When did Grandma's estate finish going through probate? I asked, tone light and curious. My father glanced at my mother. Just for a second, but I caught it. Oh, months ago, Mom said, refilling her coffee. Why do you ask? Shrugged. Just wondering about the timeline. It seemed fast. Xavier jumped in quickly. These things happen faster than people think. The lawyer was efficient. I nodded, smiling. Which lawyer was it again? I forgot the name of the firm. Another glance between my parents. Henderson and Associates, Dad said. That was wrong. Grandma had used Friedman Legal Group. I knew because I'd been there with her. I took a bite of toast and didn't correct him. I just filed that lie away with the others. Monday morning, I used my lunch break to visit Friedman Legal Group in person. The receptionist remembered me from Grandma's funeral. I need to request copies of all documents related to Rose Mitchell's estate, I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. She typed into her computer, frowning slightly. I'll need to check with Mr. Friedman. Can you wait a moment? Waited. 10 minutes later, a tall man in his 60s emerged from the back office. Miss Hayes. I'm Howard Friedman. I handled your grandmother's estate. We shook hands. His grip was firm, his expression careful. I understand you're requesting documentation. He nodded. Specifically, the final distribution records and any amendments made after her death. His face shifted just slightly. There were no amendments. The will was executed exactly as your grandmother specified. Equal distribution to both grandchildren. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. Can I get copies of everything? I want my records to be complete. The documents arrived by courier 2 days later. I spread them across my dining table like pieces of a puzzle. The will unchanged from my copy. The probate records, showing the estate cleared 7 months ago. And then the distribution records. According to these official documents, 2 checks had been issued. One to Xavier Hayes. $50,000. One to Nicole Hayes. $50,000. Both checks dated March 15th of last year. I stared at that second entry. I had never received a check. I had never been contacted about a check. I pulled out my phone and checked my bank records going back 18 months. No deposit of $50,000. No deposit of any unusual amount. Called my bank directly. Can you search for any attempted deposits or wire transfers to my account around March of last year? The representative checked. No, ma'am. Nothing matching that description. Someone had stolen $50,000 that was legally mine. And I knew exactly who. I looked closer at the distribution records. There, on the receipt confirmation page, was a signature acknowledging receipt of funds. Nicole Hayes, written in smooth cursive across the line. I pulled out my driver's license and compared the signature. They weren't even close. Mine had a distinctive loop on the capital N and a sharp angle on the H. This signature was rounded, hesitant, obviously forged. I photographed it next to my real signature on 3 different documents. My lease, my car registration, my teaching contract. The differences were undeniable. I felt something cold and clear settle in my chest. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't just parents choosing one child over another. This was fraud. This was theft. This was a crime. And they'd done it assuming I would never check, never question, never fight back. They'd banked everything on my maturity, my understanding nature, my trained compliance. That was their first mistake. Sunday dinner came again. This time I came prepared. My phone sat in my shirt pocket, recording app running, microphone facing outward. The conversation drifted naturally. Guided it gently. I've been thinking about Grandma a lot lately, I said during dessert. Remember how specific she always was about fairness? Mom smiled, nostalgic. She certainly had her principles. He nodded. She told me once that she was splitting everything equally between Xavier and me. She was really clear about that. Xavier shifted in his seat. Well, things change. Circumstances matter more than rigid rules. I turned to him, expression innocent. Did she tell you something different? Did she change her mind before she died? He hesitated just a fraction too long. She wanted the money to be used wisely. That's what matters. Dad cleared his throat. Nicole, we've been over this. The decision was made in everyone's best interest. I'm not arguing, I said softly. I just want to make sure I remember correctly. The estate went through probate last spring, right? March. Yes, Mom said firmly. And everyone received what they were supposed to receive. I obtained Xavier's business registration documents through the Public Records Office. His LLC had been formed in February of last year, 1 month before the estate distribution. I requested the initial capital investment filing. There it was. $50,000, deposited March 20th. 5 days after both checks were supposedly issued. Only $50,000. Not $100,000. If he'd received his share legitimately, that number would make sense. But according to the official records, I'd also received my $50,000, which meant there should have been $100,000 total distributed. So where was my money? I cross-referenced the dates with my parents' bank records, the ones I could access through the joint account I'd had with them in college and never closed. There on March 16th was a deposit, $50,000. The memo line read, Estate Distribution, Rem. Rose Elizabeth Mitchell. My grandmother's initials. The next day, March 17th, a transfer. $50,000 moved to Xavier's personal account. They'd intercepted my check, forged my signature, deposited it into their account, and given everything to my brother. I didn't explode. I didn't call them screaming. I sat in my apartment with my evidence organized in clear plastic sleeves, documents arranged chronologically, and I built my case like the careful person they'd always praised me for being. I contacted Howard Friedman again. I need to discuss a legal matter regarding my grandmother's estate. Privately. We met in his office that Wednesday. I laid out everything. The forged signature, the intercepted check, the bank records, the recording from dinner. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing graver with each piece of evidence. When I finished, he sat back in his chair. This is estate fraud. Potentially criminal. What do you want to do? I met his eyes. I want what's mine. I want it documented. And I want them to know they didn't get away with it. He nodded slowly. I can draft a demand letter. We'll need to involve the bank that cashed the check with a fraudulent signature. If they don't comply voluntarily, we'll file a civil suit. The evidence you have is solid. The letter arrived at my parents' house on a Tuesday morning. I know because Xavier called me within an hour. His voice sharp with panic. What the hell is this? He demanded. What's what? I asked, voice calm as glass. This letter from a lawyer. You're accusing us of fraud. I let the silence stretch. Then quietly. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm simply requesting the $50,000 that was legally distributed to me according to Grandma's will. The $50,000 I never received. You agreed to let me have it. His voice rose, defensive. I never agreed to anything. I was never asked. I was informed at dinner, after the decision was already made. My mother's voice came from the background, muffled. Xavier covered the phone, but I heard her say, "Don't say anything else." When he came back on the line, his tone had shifted, trying for reasonable. Can we talk about this in person? Family doesn't need lawyers. Family doesn't commit fraud, I replied and ended the call. They demanded a meeting. I agreed, but only at Howard Friedman's office, with him present. We gathered in his conference room on a gray Saturday morning. My parents sat on one side of the table, Xavier beside them. I sat across from them, Howard at the head. Mom tried to start with emotion. "Nicole, honey, I don't understand why you're doing this." Howard interrupted gently. "Mrs. Hayes, let's focus on the facts. Your daughter was legally entitled to $50,000 from her grandmother's estate. That distribution was recorded as completed. But Miss Hayes never received those funds." Dad's jaw tightened. "We made a family decision. You made a decision about her money without her knowledge or consent," Howard said. "And someone forged her signature on the receipt documentation." I slid the comparison photos across the table. My real signature next to the forged one. The differences were stark, undeniable. Xavier's face went pale. Mom's hand trembled slightly as she picked up the photo. We assumed you wouldn't mind. You've always been so understanding." The room filled with heavy silence. My father was the one who finally broke. "Xavier needed it more," he said, voice flat with defeat. "His business, his future. You have your career. You're stable." I leaned forward, keeping my voice level. "That wasn't your decision to make. Grandma left that money to both of us equally. She specified that in legal documents. You intercepted my check, forged my signature, and committed bank fraud." Xavier's hands clenched on the table. "We were going to pay you back eventually." "With what?" "Yes. Your business hasn't made a profit yet. And, eventually, isn't a legal timeline." Howard tapped his pen on his notepad. "Here's the situation. Miss Hayes has substantial evidence of fraud. She could pursue criminal charges. The bank has already confirmed the signature discrepancy. We're prepared to file a civil suit that would become public record." My mother's eyes widened. "Public? Estate fraud is a matter of public record once filed in court," Howard confirmed. "It would show up in background checks. It could affect professional licenses, financial credibility." I watched my father's face shift as he calculated the consequences. Xavier looked like he might be sick. "What do you want?" Dad asked finally, the fight draining from his voice. I'd prepared for this moment. "I want my $50,000 returned in full. I want a written acknowledgement from all three of you that you intercepted funds legally designated for me. And I want it completed within 30 days. Mom's voice was small. "We don't have $50,000 liquid right now. Xavier invested it." "That's not my problem," I said, and I was surprised by how steady I sounded. "You made a choice to take my money. You need to make a choice to return it. Liquidate investments. Take a loan. Sell assets. I don't care how you do it, but you have 30 days. Xavier's voice cracked. "You'd really take me down over this? I'm your brother." I looked at him directly for the first time since we'd sat down. "You already took me down. You just didn't think I'd get back up." Howard cleared his throat. "I'll draft a formal settlement agreement. $50,000 paid to Miss Hayes, plus a written admission of wrongdoing, in exchange for no criminal charges filed and no civil suit. Is that acceptable to both parties?" After the negotiation ended, I drove home through empty streets. My hands were steady on the wheel, steadier than they'd been in months. The apartment felt different when I walked in, lighter somehow, as if truth had displaced something heavy. I made tea and sat by the window, watching city lights blur into constellations. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Please reconsider. We're family." I typed back. "Family doesn't mean accepting theft." She didn't respond. I didn't need her to. The next morning, I woke without the familiar knot in my stomach. The next 3 weeks were silent. No family calls. No text messages. No Sunday dinners. I went to work, came home and waited. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel conflicted. Felt clear. On day 18 my aunt called. "Nicole, your mother is beside herself. Can't you find some compromise?" I kept my voice gentle but firm. "They stole $50,000 from me. Would you compromise if someone stole $50,000 from you?" She hesitated. Well, when you put it that way. There is no other way to put it, I said. This isn't about being stubborn or holding a grudge. This is about correcting a crime. Word spread through the extended family. I didn't volunteer information, but I didn't hide it either. When people asked, I told them the simple truth. I discovered my inheritance had been taken, and I was working to recover it legally. Some people were supportive. Others thought I was overreacting. I didn't try to convince anyone. I just let the facts stand for themselves. On day 27, Howard called. They've agreed to the full terms. The money will be transferred tomorrow, and I have the signed admissions. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. All three of them signed. All three. Your parents took a home equity loan. Xavier is liquidating his business investments. There was a pause. They want to know if you'll meet with them after the transfer is complete. Thought about that. About sitting across from them again. About hearing explanations or justifications or apologies. No, I said finally. The settlement agreement is the end of our legal business. Anything else is personal, and I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe not ever. The next day, I watched my bank account balance increase by $50,000. I sat on my couch, staring at the number on my phone screen, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness, not vindication. Just peace. The score was even. The theft was corrected. And I owed them nothing anymore. The envelope arrived by certified mail 2 days after the payment cleared. Inside were 3 separate letters, each handwritten. My father's was brief and formal. I acknowledged that I intercepted funds legally designated for Nicole Hayes and participated in fraudulent activity regarding estate distribution. This was wrong, and I accept full responsibility. My mother's was longer, filled with justifications about wanting to help Xavier, about thinking I'd understand, about how they'd plan to make it right eventually. But at the end, the admission was clear. I acknowledge my participation in taking money that wasn't mine to take. Xavier's letter was the hardest to read, not because it was emotional, but because it wasn't. It was resentful, clipped, barely masking anger. I acknowledge receipt and use of funds that were legally designated for my sister without her knowledge or permission. No apology. No remorse. Just bare admission because the legal agreement required it. I filed all 3 letters with my other documentation. Then I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. One. Not through screaming or drama or family warfare. Through patience, evidence, and the law. That night, I sat with the 3 letters spread before me on my kitchen table. I traced my finger over their words. Reluctant, resentful, yet undeniably real. This was accountability in its rawest form. Not the apology I dreamed of as a child when I felt overlooked, but something more valuable. Documented truth. I took a photo of all 3 letters together and sent it to Howard with a simple message. Thank you for believing me. He replied immediately. You did this yourself. I just held the door open. I smiled at that. He was right. I'd walked through that door on my own power, carrying evidence and conviction. I'd reclaimed what was mine without losing who I was. My uncle called 2 weeks later. Your father asked me to reach out, he said carefully. He wants to know what it would take for you to come back to family gatherings. I considered the question honestly. Respect, I said finally. Actual respect, not just the assumption that I'll go along with whatever's decided. My voice mattering as much as Xavier's. Being treated like an equal, not like the easy one who won't cause problems. There was silence on the other end. Then, that's fair. I'll tell him. But I knew the truth. Some things once broken don't fit back together the same way. They'd shown me who they were when they thought I wouldn't fight back. That knowledge didn't disappear just because the money was returned. I didn't hate them. I didn't want revenge beyond what I'd already claimed. I just didn't trust them anymore. And trust, once gone, is almost impossible to rebuild. I was okay with that. I was finally completely okay with that. I sent an email to my parents and Xavier, CCing Howard Friedman as a witness. It was professional and clear. I'm establishing boundaries for future contact. I'm open to rebuilding a relationship slowly, but it will require demonstrated change over time. I won't attend family gatherings where my concerns are dismissed or where I'm expected to pretend nothing happened. I won't engage in conversations where I'm blamed for enforcing consequences for actions that were illegal. If you want me in your life, it will be on terms of mutual respect. The responses came separately. Dad's was short. Understood. Mom's was longer, defensive, hurt. Xavier didn't respond at all. I didn't follow up. I didn't chase. I'd said what needed to be said. The rest was up to them. Christmas came and went without the usual family gathering. I spent it with friends and it was peaceful. No tension. No walking on eggshells. No performing gratitude for being included. Just genuine warmth with people who valued me for exactly who I was. My aunt invited me to lunch in February, just the two of us. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. She didn't start with an agenda. We just talked about work, about books we were reading, about plans for spring. Near the end, she said quietly, "I'm proud of you, you know, for standing up for yourself." I looked at her carefully. "That's not what you said 3 months ago." She had the grace to look embarrassed. "I know. I thought you were being harsh. But your uncle showed me the documents, the forged signature. I didn't realize how bad it was." Pause. "You weren't overreacting. You were responding exactly right." Those words meant more than I expected them to. Not because I needed validation, but because they confirmed something important. When you stand on truth, eventually people see it. Maybe not everyone. Maybe not immediately. But the people capable of seeing it will. We finished lunch peacefully. As we parted, she hugged me. "Don't let them make you the villain of this story. You're not." With the $50,000 returned, plus the months of saving during the silence, I had options. I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor. "I want to invest this wisely," I told her. "I want it to grow. I want it to secure my future exactly the way my grandmother intended." We built a plan. Part invested in index funds, part in a high-yield savings account, part toward a down payment on a small house. Nothing flashy. Nothing risky. Just solid, careful planning. The kind of planning that reflected who I actually was, not who my family had assumed I'd be. 6 months later, I closed on a 2-bedroom cottage with a backyard. It was mine. Fully, legally, completely mine. I sent my parents the address, along with a brief note. "This is what Grandma's gift became. This is what you almost took from me. I'm happy now. I hope someday you'll be happy for me." My mother called crying. I let her cry. I didn't comfort her, but I didn't hang up either. When she was done, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know," I said. And I did. I just didn't know yet if sorry was enough. Xavier reached out nearly a year after the settlement. His business had failed. The investments he'd liquidated to repay me had been his only capital. He was working a regular job now, starting over. "I get it now," he said when we met for coffee. "What it feels like to have something taken from you." I didn't feel triumph. Felt tired. "I never wanted you to fail," I said honestly. "I just wanted what was mine." He nodded, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "I convinced myself I deserved it more. That you'd be fine without it. I was wrong." It wasn't a complete apology. It wasn't dramatic reconciliation. But it was real. We talked for an hour carefully, like people learning each other's language again. When we left, we didn't hug. But we didn't part angry either. There was a long road ahead if we were ever going to be siblings again in any meaningful way. But at least now there was a road. Narrow and uncertain, but there. My parents tried harder after that. Smaller gestures, more consistent. They asked instead of assumed. They listened instead of dismissed. It wasn't perfect. Some days it felt performative. But it was different. And different was a start. I'm sitting on my back porch now, 2 years later, watching the sun set behind trees I planted myself. The money Grandma Rose left me did exactly what she intended. It gave me security, options, and a foundation. But the fight to claim it gave me something she couldn't have planned for. My voice. I learned that maturity isn't silence. Understanding isn't surrender. Being the easy one doesn't make you the loved one. It makes you the convenient one. My family assumed my quietness meant acceptance. They mistook my patience for weakness. They thought the story ended the moment I smiled at that dinner table and said, "Of course." They were wrong. That was just the beginning. The moment I decided I was worth fighting for. The moment I stopped performing the role they'd written for me and started living the truth they'd tried to bury. I don't talk to my family every day. But when I do, it's honest. Boundaries held. Respect earned. I don't regret the fight. I don't regret the distance it created. Because on the other side of that fight, I found something priceless. Myself, unmuted and uncompromising. And that was worth more than $50,000 could ever buy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed silent. If I'd let them keep the narrative they'd built. Let Xavier keep the money. Let my parents keep believing their favoritism was justified. I'd probably still be sitting at those Sunday dinners, smiling through the inequality, being praised for my maturity while being robbed of my dignity. The cost of peace would have been my self-respect. And that's a price I'm no longer willing to pay. Grandma Rose used to tell me that quiet people aren't weak. They're just waiting for the right moment to speak. She was right. My moment came when I stopped waiting for permission to claim what was already mine. The cottage is quiet tonight. Just the crickets and the wind. It's the kind of peace you can't buy, only earn. And I earned every inch of it.